aja nggak tahu kali ini ya.
Nggak, New York City illegal, Son.
Ilegal ya.
Iya.
Oh, ilegal. Good morning, Bante.
Morning. Hello.
Namo Buddhaya, Bante.
Oh my God, this looks so cool, Bante.
Yeah, you're using your cell phone, right, Bante? Your phone?
No, I'm on my computer
Oh.
with
nice.
with my microphone and everything. Yeah, no.
Yeah, did you
sounds
connect the
good, Bante.
microphone? Okay. So what's going on, guys? This week we found out there's some a member of us got COVID-19, so that's why we decided to do a separate online meeting again with Bante at the temple and us at home. So it'll be interesting. But luckily Bante's tested negative. I was tested negative. My wife tested negative. Some of our folks too tested negative. So everything's good, and hopefully we can go back to normal again once Bante back from his parents' house.
It's kind of feedback. So I think it's a feedback from Bante.
Is that right, Bante? Are you online on 2 devices?
I have my phone on my YouTube.
No, it shouldn't be a problem in your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I think it's good now. No,
Do I have the feedback, Bante? Andy, do I have the feedback or Bante has the feedback?
no, I think it's good now.
Testing, testing. Okay, feedback. No, good. All good.
Frank. So we're gonna start in 2 minutes, sorry.
Okay, hold on. Let me just my.
Alright guys, so I'm gonna mute all of you guys except the host and the co-host.
Do so.
All right. So it's 9:43. We still have 2 minutes. So good morning, everyone. Selamat datang. Selamat berkumpul bersama kami lagi. Today we have Bante Jayasaro to give us Dhamma talk. And before he gives us the Dhamma talk, we're gonna start with small puja and request of Tisarana and Panchashila. Today's talk the title is The Mind. I'm sorry I sent out the invitations pretty late yesterday, so sorry about that, but we can go ahead at 9:45. And here's the rules of this puja today. Bagi yang rekan-rekan yang ikut online, silakan duduk di tempat yang tegak dan layak bila memungkinkan di depan altar, berpakaian rapi dan sopan, dan dimohon tidak menyalakan TV atau handphone dan tidak sambil makan. Selama berlangsungnya puja, dimohon juga tetap menjaga ketenangan dan perhatian penuh. Slide selanjutnya nanti. Oke, untuk Bapak Ibu yang ingin berdanang untuk pelunasan wihara pariwara Dhammacala, dana Anda dapat disalurkan melalui rekening kami di BCA atas nama Ibu Indrawati Citra dengan nomor account 137-141-2889, dan bagi yang memiliki akses ke Zelle atau PayPal, silakan dikirimkan dana Anda ke wipada.ny@gmail.com dengan konfirmasi dana ditujukan ke Indonesian Buddhist Family of New York. Baik, marilah kita mulai puja bakti dengan nama Karapata. Arahang sama sambuddho bhagawa Udang Bhagawantang Abhiwademi Sang Bhagawa
Sukhiyatu. Sukhiyatu.
Okasa ahang bante tisaranena sating pancasila damang yajami anugahang katwa silang detame bante dutiyampi okasa ahang bante tisaranena sating pancasila damang yajami anugahang katwa silang detame bante tatiyampi okasa ahang bante tisaranena sating pancasila damang yajami anugahang katwa silang detame bante
Yamahang vadami tang vadeta.
ama bante
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisaranaгаmanang sampunang.
Amma bhante.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura Merya Majjapamaddatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamaddatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Tisaranena sadding panchasilang dhammang samadhiyatva sadhukang surakitang katva appamadena sampadeta bang. Silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbuting yanti, tasma silang visodaye.
Ama bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. us recite Dhammadesana Aradhana. Brahmajaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjali Andiwarang Ayachata Santi Dasata Parajaka Jatika Ese Dudamang Anukam Bimang Bajang.
Okay, friends. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're at. So today's topic is a very important topic. Last week we talked about beginning of meditation practice, and this week's topic is talking about the mind. Right? And I want to start out with a verse. Mano pubangama dhamma, manosetta manomaya, manasata padutena basativa karotiva, tato nang dukamanveti, chayava unapayani. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master, mind is their maker. Actors speak with a defiled state of mind, then suffering follows, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. This is the very first line of the Dhammapada. The very first line, Dhammapada number 1. And it's apt that it starts out talking about the mind. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their maker. Actors speak with a defiled state of mind, and suffering follows. This is a wonderful simile, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. You can think about how this ox, right, it's carrying, it's latched to a cart, and it's carrying a heavy load, and maybe the owner is on the cart and he's whipping the ox, go faster, we have to make it to market or whatever, right? So you have this poor beast of burden, and right behind the beast of burden's feet is the wheel, right? And if you've ever done, like I've done lots of landscape work, so I've carried wheelbarrows in front of me and things behind me, and I've actually had my feet get run over by wheelbarrow wheels, and it's not pleasant. So I when I first saw this simile, I thought, okay, I understand what this poor ox is going through, right? And this is like a mind that is very, very heavy, full of like anger and aversion and envy and all these very heavy negative mind states, right? And so, but this is not it. There's still another line. Mano pubangama dhamma manusetta manomaya manasache pasanena basativa karotiva tato nang sukha manveti chayava anapayani. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master, mind is their maker. Actors speak with a pure state of mind, then happiness follows you like a shadow follows you without departing. Now think of the simile from the previous stanza of the ox, lashed to the cart, carrying this heavy load, right? That's a very heavy mind, but a mind that is full of goodwill, of letting go, of happiness, right? Is a very light mind, right? Your shadow doesn't weigh on you at all. Most of the time you don't even know your shadow is there, right? So this is the Buddha setting up a dichotomy for us, setting up saying this is the mind, right? And all of our actions stem from the mind, right? All of our speech, all of our physical actions, right? All start as a thought, an impetus, an impulse in the mind. Right? This is why it's very important for us to understand the mind. It is the mind that loves. It is the mind that hates. It is the mind that decides to help. It is the mind that decides to harm. This mind. Okay? So it behooves us as Buddhist practitioners, those of us who are following the Noble Eightfold Path, almost every aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path has to do with the mind and understanding the mind. All right, when we practice dana, generosity, practice letting go, right? We can notice in our mind that we might have a tendency that because of our survival instincts, we want to keep what's best for us or for our children. And we'd only give to other people only what's left over, right? You can notice, this is how this mind is, right? Even just by practicing dana, you can investigate the mind. Okay. Practicing our sila, practicing living by virtuous principles, not wanting to harm a being, right? We can see the mind, right? Maybe there's a mouse or a bug, a spider, and we have fear in our mind, and that fear wants us to harm, to get that being away from us, because we don't want that being to harm us. Right? But then we practice the precepts and we say, I do not wish to harm this being. What are you doing? You're going against the innate tendencies of the mind. That's practicing. Right? And then when you sit down to meditate, or you practice satipatthana, mindfulness in all activities, you're with the mind. You see how the mind acts. You engage with people and they say something and you see how the mind responds to that. The mind likes it or it dislikes it, right? And then you don't like that person or you like that person, right? Mind is the forerunner of all things. All actions are led by the mind, right? So it behooves us to understand the mind. And how do we do it? You can listen to Dhamma talks, and you can even listen to scientists talk about the mind. You can learn a lot that way. But the way you really know about the mind is by practice, by examining and investigating the mind, by watching what the mind does in a certain situation. Or let's give an example of the bugs or the mice or creepy crawlies, whatever it is that brings up fear and we don't like it, right? In the beginning, you'll notice this fear and anxiety and desire to drive it away, get it away, even if you have to kill it. But then as you practice Dhamma over time, slowly over time, you see that the mind actually changes because you understand more. You see, okay, this is just another being. The being is just doing its thing. Maybe we can't live together, so I need to get it out, but let me try not to harm it, right? That's a change. That's a change of your mind. Your mind has gone from full of anxiety and fear to full of metta, which I think that'll be a good topic for next week, talking about metta, right? Full of metta instead, and full of non-harming, avihingsa. We don't wish to harm these beings, right? So you can see the difference in the mind as you practice, as you develop the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's very, very important to understand how this mind works. Because for the most part, interestingly enough, when you understand how this mind works, you understand the minds of others. Right? That's not 100% because we all have our own different proclivities and tendencies, and our mind is shaped by our own experiences, so there are differences. But for the most part, most of our minds are the same. One of the biggest reasons why most of our minds are the same is because we all have what? We all have greed, hatred, and delusion. which I spoke about a couple talks ago. Right? That is at the deepest core of all of our minds, unless we're an awakened being. Right? So we can understand that beings often act out of these unwholesome roots. And so when they do, it's not a surprise to you. You don't get angry at them because they're like, oh, okay, they're just, they're acting out of such and such a way because they have greed, hatred, and delusion, just like me. Right? I also have greed, hatred, and delusion. I also don't see things the right way, but I'm trying, I'm practicing, I'm trying to develop. So the mind is very important to understand. The Buddha doesn't talk too much. He doesn't give a lot of details, right, in the early texts about the mind. Later on, they come up with all kinds of schemes and add so much more. But in the early texts, the Buddha uses 3 words to describe the mind. Chitta, Mano, and Vijnana. So chitta is the affective part of the mind, which means this is like the emotional part. Right? The feeling part. This is why chitta in like Thai forest, they usually translate chitta in English as heart. Like if you read various translations of Ajahn Chah or Bhante Sujato, Ajahn Brahm, etc., you'll see when they say the heart, what they really mean is chitta, which is an aspect of the mind. They're not literally saying like the heart, like kind of like how, I don't know how in Indonesia they have, they think about this, but in my culture, how I understand it, the heart, they think of like, oh, it comes from the heart. And they don't literally mean like the heart, right? Although maybe in ancient times they did, but they mean like it comes from the mind. So this is the affective part of the mind, right? But then there's also mano, which is more of the logical, reasoning aspect of the mind. And you'll see, if you watch your mind, you'll see that oftentimes these two are kind of competing, right? A certain situation will arise and your emotional part wants to be angry or whatever, and your logical part is like, well, no, we shouldn't do this. This is silly. This is not going to help us, etc., right? So as practitioners, we should understand that actually these are both part of our mind, right? We're not trying to depress one and elevate another. We're not trying to say this part is bad, this part is good. This is just simply 2 aspects of our mind. And the third aspect is consciousness, vijnana, right? Not much to say about that. Right? Consciousness is, when we're not conscious, then we cannot investigate, we cannot understand the mind. Right? We need that consciousness to be able to investigate, to be able to practice. Because when we're unconscious, when we're asleep, or we got knocked out or whatever, we can't practice. So consciousness is always there for us to be able to practice. So when we understand our mind, the Buddha says that this mind is luminous, but it is defiled. So what this means is that there's various defilements, there's various fetters that are on the mind, right, that defile it. But the great thing about the practice is the Buddha gives us hope. The Buddha says, you can make your mind luminous. You can make your mind clear and bright. The way I think about it is like a lighthouse. So like most of us are like, our mind is like a lighthouse that hasn't been used in many, many decades, and the glass is very gunky, right? There's so much gunk that even if you turned on the light, not much light would come out, right? But as we practice the Noble Eightfold Path, as we cleanse our mind, as we develop our mind skillfully, it's like we are cleaning the glass of the lighthouse. And then such as like an arahant, an awakened being, their mind is like the glass is completely clear and the lighthouse blazes in light, blazes in glory, so luminous, right? That's the light, that's the mind of an awakened being. But we're not there yet. We have lots of gunk in our lighthouse glass, right? So every once in a while, some light comes out, little beams here and there, right? But as we practice, as we develop our mind, then more and more our mind shines brightly, right? Our goodness shines, our kindness shines, the mind's desire for skillfulness, for wholesomeness shines out. Right? So this is our task as practitioners, as followers of the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha in the Ovada Patimokkha, he says there are three things that are teachings of all the Buddhas: to abandon evil action, right? Not to do evil things, to do good things, and to cleanse the mind. These are the teachings of all these are the teachings of all the Buddhas. Right? So that's our goal as Buddhist people. Those three things, right? To cleanse the mind of these defilements. To cleanse the mind of these things that corrupt us, to cause us to act in unskillful ways, to act out of greed, hatred, and delusion, instead of non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. Right? And this is not easy. It's not easy, but it is our calling. It is our quest. It is our mission as Buddhist people to understand the mind, to cleanse the mind. The Buddha calls out to us that we have what's called anusayas. Anusayas are underlying tendencies, habits. I call them underlying habitual tendencies. Because the more you actually understand the practice, the more it's really, most of it is working with habits. We have lots of habits, right? Not only habits that we've built up over this lifetime, but tendencies and proclivities from previous lifetimes as well, right? So we have lots of anusayas. And there's a wonderful sutta, one of my favorite suttas in all of the old texts, the Nikayas. It's called the Simile of the Arrow. And in it, the Buddha explains the difference between an awakened being and a regular person. An Arya Savaka, a disciple of the Noble Ones, and a Patujana, a regular worldly person. So in this, the Buddha says that when a regular person comes in contact with something unpleasant, painful, harmful, right? It is as if they get hit by an arrow. That is what you would call dukkha. Physical suffering, right? And then immediately after, they are hit by a second arrow. Why? Because when they have this unpleasant experience, they cry, lament, dislike, they reverse, they try to push it away, right? They suffer, so they create their own suffering with a second arrow. But he says the Arahant, the one who is awakened, they also feel the first arrow. And you can see this in the suttas. The Buddha had his body, especially as he got older, it was, just like any other old body, lots of pains and hard to move and such and such, and he had to rest it and things like that, right? But an Arahant does not feel the second arrow. They dodge the second arrow, right? Or they catch it, like you see in like movies and TV or ancient stories. They catch the arrow, right? They don't suffer from the second arrow. Okay. So part of our underlying tendency is this, the Buddha says. The Buddha continues. He says, when hit by that first arrow, when we have an unpleasant experience of our body or mind, the natural tendency for us is to what? To cry, to lament, to try to escape it. That's what we do. When we have an unpleasant experience, we don't want to have anything to do with it. We're averse, right? You can see the mind. Next time you're in an unpleasant experience, I don't know, in traffic, in line somewhere, wherever, where you start to notice, you have to wait, or somebody has caused you to have to do something over again. Whatever unpleasant experience, watch the mind. Say, this is a wonderful opportunity to see how my mind reacts. And then you watch your mind go through all of these processes. I can't believe that person. This should happen to that person. You should do this. You should do this. I can't believe they didn't do that. Right? Your mind is going through over and over again all of these things. Right? Even sometimes you might even have, your mind might say, we should kill that person. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that would come into my mind, right? Right? But that's the tendency. Your mind, you so dislike unpleasant experiences that these things come up in your mind. Okay? And likewise, the Buddha says, when you have a pleasant experience, something that's really nice, like good food or good companionship or whatever, what is our habitual tendency? Habitual tendency is to cling, to hold on to it so it doesn't go away, to want more of it. We're kind of like, you ever watch a squirrel or some animal, like they're collecting acorns? And you can also see this in humans, because I know I've done this myself. I've seen it in myself. Like they're holding on to whatever they like, and then they're trying to grab more. Like they're holding on, and they're trying to grab more. Like this, right? And then things are falling and stuff like this. But that's our tendency. We want more of it. We like it. Right? So that's our underlying tendency, our habit, when we have something pleasant happen. And you can see this in your mind. As soon as something pleasant happens, something nice happens, you can also watch your mind. You might say, ooh, this is really nice. I like this. This is very beneficial. I should have more of this. Oh, this ice cream, well, I want 10 more pints of this ice cream. We should make sure that this refrigerator, the freezer, has a bunch of it so that it doesn't run out, right? And if it's getting low, we need to go get more, right? You can see this. It's very, when you start to watch your mind, see the problem is most people don't pay attention to our mind. So you don't see it. You don't understand it. And then stuff happens and you get angry. Or stuff happens and you get very greedy. Right? And you're just going along. You have no idea. Right? The Buddha has a line also in the Dhammapada with this. He says, mindfulness, heedfulness, is close to the deathless. The deathless is an epithet for Nibbana. Right? Because when you become awakened, there's no more death, no more birth, no more death. So, heedfulness is close to the deathless. Heedlessness is close to death. Those who are who are mindful, never die. Those who are heedless are as if dead already. like zombies, right? So most of us are walking around like the living dead because we're not mindful. We have no idea how our mind works. We're not observing the mind. We're just going along with it. We're just letting it do whatever it wants to do. Right? Something happens, you get angry, you act. Right? When I worked for Child Protective Services in New Jersey, I worked with people who had all kinds of stuff. I worked with people who had real strong anger issues. And it was sad because for them, right, they would have, something would trigger them and they would go all like, I don't know if you know the Incredible Hulk, like the big green, superhero guy who gets really angry and he turns into this beast, right? So they would get really angry and turn into this beast. And then afterwards, when they would go back to their human form, obviously this is not literal, this is not real. I'm just using it as symbolism. But when they come back down from it, they realize, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I feel so bad. Right? And it's like they're trapped. They can't understand, they can't see the causes and conditions that led to them getting so angry and going off the rails. Right? And they feel bad. They know that what they did, they hurt people and they hurt themselves. But they don't know a way out of that. They don't know how to escape it because they don't know the mind. Right? This is what's so important. Somebody who understands the mind, they can see right off the bat, if something happens, somebody cuts you off in traffic, somebody says something you don't like, they can see anger and aversion, agitation arise in the mind. That gives them a power. That gives them a choice. This is why I say mindfulness is a superpower, because you get to see things and have choices that the average person does not. Why? Because the average person is as dead already, right? As the Buddha says, right? So this is why it's so important to understand our mind, right? Because the more we understand our mind, the more skillful we can act in the world for ourselves and others. The less we understand our mind, the more harmful we act in the world towards ourselves and others. So it's very important to understand how the mind works. And again, I can tell you all kinds of things, and other bhikkhus and bhikkhunis can tell you things, and scientists can tell you things, but you have to be able to see it for yourself in your own mind for you to really understand, right? It's not an intellectual understanding, and it's an experiential understanding. You understand it in your own experience. Okay? That's important, because when you do understand it within your own experience, then it becomes very natural to act in ways that are pleasant, skillful, because you realize, oh man, the mind, I don't like my mind when it's like this. It's so heavy, it's so oppressive, it's so exhausting. I'm so tired having a mind like this. And then on the other side, it's so nice, so peaceful to have a pure, clean, bright mind. Just like the shadow, right? No heaviness at all. It's so wonderful. Okay? And so going back to the sutta, the simile of the arrow, the Buddha says, so when somebody is beset by unpleasant experience, their habit is to drown themselves in pleasant experience. And this is also very easy to see. Why do people take drugs? Why do people take alcohol? Right? Why do people eat a lot of food like me? right? Drugs and alcohol were never my addiction. Food is my addiction. Food was my friend. Food was my escape. Food was my shot of pleasant feeling in an unpleasant experience, right? The Buddha tells us this is our habit. The only way that we know to try to run away from unpleasant experience is by drowning ourselves in pleasant experience. And that's also unskillful. It doesn't really help us. Right? It doesn't really make us better. Right? You just look at, somebody who's a drug addict or an alcoholic or somebody who's, 300 or 400 pounds like I was, right? Because of food, right? That doesn't make you better, right? It's only a short escape, but it's the only escape we know, right? So this is what we do. And for many people, maybe they don't go as far as becoming an addict of something, but they like to watch TV, right? To escape from the unpleasantness of their life. They like to watch TV. They like to do something that is a pleasant experience so that they can forget about the unpleasant experience. This is even the case when it comes to deep states of concentration like jhanas. Right? The Buddha, remember in the early days, the Buddha learned all of these very deep samadhi techniques. He mastered jhanas inside and out. And you know what they say about people who master jhanas? They can say it's like Monday. It's like, I don't like what this week. This week looks like it's going to be hard. Why don't I just go into jhana? Right? You can go into deep states of concentration for a whole week, for 7 days. And you're just chilling chilling. Your mind is clear, bright, nothing bothering you. You're just meditating. You're just deep in samadhi for 7 days. So the Buddha was able to do these kind of things. But then he came out of that samadhi 7 days and he looked around. And what do you think he saw? What do you think he observed? Right? He escaped his dukkha for 7 days. But when he came back, it was there. Right? After you take the drug, you escape your dukkha for a little bit. But when the drug wears off, it's back. And you want more. After you take your alcohol and you get drunk, right? For a little while, you've escaped your suffering. But then, it's back. After you eat the pleasant food, for a little while, it takes you away from your suffering, but then it's back. Right? So this is what we do. We're trying to escape unpleasant by drowning ourselves in the pleasant. And our habit for pleasant experiences is to want more. So in this tendency, in this understanding how our mind works, we see that we're causing ourselves so much suffering because of these habits. Because we're running away from unskillful things and we're trying to grasp for, we're running away from unpleasant experiences and we're trying to grasp pleasant experiences. Right? Just that one understanding in your mind can give you much joy and freedom from suffering. Just that one understanding. Right? The Buddha tells us that patience is the highest practice. What is patience but being able to endure what is unskillful or what is unpleasant? To endure what we don't like. Right? That's a practice that most of us do not do. Right? But it's part of the path. Practicing the Noble Eightfold Path actually is doing that. Right? Understanding that running away causes us suffering. Understanding that running towards causes us suffering. Because it's a constant struggle. We're trying to run away and grasp at the same time. Push and grasp, push and grasp. And it's exhausting. But this is our mind. So when you see this, when you start to see the state of your mind, you say, oh man, what am I going to do about this? This is exhausting. How about I practice? How about I start letting go? Right? How about I start developing patience and endurance? How about I start developing courage to face what I don't like? Right? How about I develop courage to decline chasing after things that you like? Right? And then gradually you start to develop an equanimity, an equilibrium, right? You know, when I notice the times in my mind where I'm not chasing after something or running away from something, it's bliss, it's peace. I'm just here. I'm not running after anything. There's nothing I crave that I want. There's nothing that I crave that I don't want. I'm just here. Just a peaceful, equanimous mind. And that's very blissful. It's very good. And you start to see this is how you understand how you feed the mind, how you cause your own suffering. Right? A thought arises. Let's chase after this. This is a pleasant experience. And you're like, oh yeah, let's do it. And then you go chasing. Right? But then as you develop your mind, the thought arises, let's chase after this. It's a pleasant experience. And you start to think, yeah, it's pleasant. And it'll feel good. But there's a lot of drawbacks. There's a lot of suffering that comes along with it. Maybe I won't do it this time. Maybe I won't chase after it. Right? And then maybe you have a little bit of what they call FOMO, right? Like a fear of missing out. But you realize, that's also fake. That's also not real. That's just craving. I'm happy just being here, just being with peace. Not running here or there like a madman or a mad woman, exhausted. Because that's what the mind does, right? The first time you sit down to meditate and your mind is like ping pong balls all over, going all over, going to this country, going to the past, going to the future, going all over the place. And you're just kind of like, you can't believe it, what your mind is doing. And then you start and you investigate that more and you see that more. And then you start to see how you actually cause that. You start to see dependent origination, how when this arises, that arises. When this ceases, that ceases. So you start to understand, I am causing my own suffering by doing this. I am causing my mind to crave for this by building it up. Like your mind has thoughts, oh yeah, this would be really good for us. We should have this. We should do this. Right? And then you're like, yes, yeah, we should do it. And you start daydreaming about all the good things and the reasons why you should do this thing. Right? But that causes suffering. So then the mind comes up and you're like, oh, we should do this. And you're like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to decline this time. Right? But you'll feel that urge to do it anyway That's where patient endurance comes in. He said, nope, I know. You reflect on the downsides. You reflect, I know that even though it feels good, even though I want to do this right now, if I do, I will suffer later on. So how about I don't do this? How about I just let that go? Okay? So this is the mind. Mind is the forerunner. Mind is the master. Mind is the maker. It all stems from the mind. Our happiness from the mind. Our suffering from the mind. It all begins and ends in the mind. So cleansing our mind, cleaning our lighthouse so that our mind can be luminous and bright. This is our quest. This is our mission. This is our journey as Buddhist practitioners following the Noble Eightfold Path. This is what we do. And all of these practices help do that, like dana and sila and bhavana and samadhi, right? Practicing all of these practices, and sati, mindfulness. All of these practices work together towards that goal of cleansing the mind, right? Not one is any more important than the other. They all work together in tandem, in conjunction, in a symbiotic relationship. They all do this one goal. So friends, I think that's enough talk for today on the mind. We can go to questions.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante. All right. For whoever wants to ask Bante directly, you can raise your hand through the feature on Zoom. On the lower bottom right corner, there's three dots on your phone. You can click on that and then click on the raise button feature. Or if you're on laptop or computer, under inside the participants folder, there's also a raise hand feature on the bottom right hand side. All right, while we wait, so Bante, I have a questions while we wait for other people to ask about your topic today, Bante.
Okay.
In regards to, I know that you did mention about consciousness early on. Would that be different from being mindful and being conscious, Bante?
So it's important to understand, like, definition wise, conscious or consciousness is not the same as being mindful. You can be conscious. If you are conscious, that means you're awake. You're able to experience, to do things, right? You can do an activity and you're conscious during the whole thing, but you're not mindful. You're not aware, right? That's a very big difference, right? We do activity, like we have part of our, as human beings, part of our development is that we do an activity to a point where we can do it without thinking, without being mindful, right? Because the mind then can devote energy towards something else. Or the brain, I should probably denote the brain and the mind there. But, so this is, we do an activity. Like even for me, I'll give an example. Doing the precepts. Because I've done the precepts so many times, the mind will often see like, okay, let's start thinking about something else. Let's start thinking about, so while I'm doing the precepts today, half hour ago, my mind starts to want to think about how I'm going to chant the merit at the end, right? Right? Because so my mind, I was conscious, my mind was going off, but I wasn't mindful of what was happening, right? I was here with you, doing Panchasila, but my mind goes to punya. All right? And so I said, okay, come on. So, you have to bring it back and then bring back to mindfulness. So that's the difference, right? There's you can think of, I guess you can think of it as like an aspect. Consciousness is the base level. You have to be conscious to then be mindful. You can't be, so this is like where the Buddha says, like, you can't be mindful when you're asleep. Like, so if you see the Sampajanya list, the clear comprehension, the Buddha says to be clearly aware and mindful when walking back and forth, when stretching your limbs, when, walking with your bowl and robes, and when eating, going to the bathroom, etc. The one thing he doesn't say is when you're asleep, right? Because you can't be mindful when you're asleep because there's no consciousness. So consciousness is the base requirement for you to then practice mindfulness, right? You can be conscious. People are conscious their whole lives, but they can never gain an ounce of wisdom from being mindful their whole lives, right? So that's a big difference in that regard, right? You can think of being mindful as an aspect of your mind that allows you to focus in on a certain thing. So like if you're being mindful of your breathing, right? Or if you're observing a part of your body that's in pain, bringing your awareness to that part. Or you're in a situation in the world, right? And you're bringing your awareness to what's going on with your mind and body, but also what's going on with the people around you and things like that, right? Your mind is not starting to think about future or the past. Your mind is right there. That's very different than consciousness.
Thank you about that. All right, it looks like Sis Harita has questions. Please
All right.
go ahead, sis.
Good morning, Bante. Buongiorno.
Hello, Arita.
Hello. Bante, you mentioned about unpleasant feeling. My unpleasant feeling usually related to punctuality. If I'm in a meeting room, I become so anxiety. If whoever I have the appointment with being so late. And then if I do the investigation versus, like you said before, a gratification, the danger, and the escape. The gratification is if I feel like I could achieve a lot more things if everything's going so on time. The danger if I feel really bad if I could not achieve what I have to do for that day. And how could I escape for this situation? Thank you.
So one of the most important things, this is a wonderful life lesson. The wonderful life lesson is that almost everything is not under your control. That's a hard lesson to understand. That's a hard lesson, right? You have no control over that person being on time or not, do you? You can yell at them. You can even try to be nice and encourage them, and even try to maybe explain why being late is not good for them or for others. But guess what? Maybe they're not mindful. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they're just stuck in a cycle where they're just perpetually late. Right? They're late for waking up. They're late for brushing their teeth. They're late, and so because they're late from one thing, they're late for everything else the rest of the day. Right? And you suffering because of their lateness is one of the few things that actually is in your control. Right? Well, you can try to see if you can work around it. So like if you have a regular meeting, right? And they're always late, almost consistently late, well then, don't show up on time. If they're always 20 minutes late, say, oh, guess what? I'll show up 10 minutes late, and then I have 10 minutes more I can do other things. Right? Now, so for an example here, like, you know, when the people come and bring me my food here at the temple, some people are right on time and some people are consistently 10 to 15 minutes late. And so I'm not going to come down and just be like, where are these people? You know, it's 11 o'clock. I'm supposed to be. No, it's like, oh, well, I guess I got an extra 10 minutes. I'll come down 10 minutes later, right? And so then it works out. So then I'm not stressing myself out, right? Because I believe me, I know your pain because I'm a very orderly person. I'm always 15 minutes early to everything, this and this and this. But the world doesn't behave that way, right? So you have to practice letting go. That's part of our practice, is to develop letting go, all right? And especially if you're the boss, it's even worse, right? Because you're going to try to enforce your views on how everything should be this way on other people. And guess what you're going to do? You're not going to do anything but cause yourself suffering, right? Because you can't control other people. You can only work on yourself. So you have to reflect on this and understand. It's very good. You're a very good student that you remember gratification, danger, and escape. You're a good practitioner. It's very good. Right? So you have to reflect and understand. You observe it. Use it as an investigation. Is this person always consistently late? It gets a little bit more annoying if sometimes they're 5 minutes late, sometimes they're 10 minutes late, sometimes they're not late, sometimes, and then, because then you can't really like schedule, you can't say, okay, well, I'm going to be a little bit late. But, you know, sometimes that's all you can do, is to use that, turn it into an advantage, turn it into a benefit. All right? If you're already worried, oh my God, I need to do X, I'm not going to get everything done. But you know, okay, this person's always about 15 minutes late. I got 15 extra minutes to do something important that I can do instead of just sitting there waiting for the person, right? So you can keep doing what you're doing because that is what you need to do. Gratification, danger, and escape. Investigating it and try to use it to your advantage, right? You're not going to force that person to be on time. So how you act is what's important. How you act is what's going to mean that you cause yourself suffering or not. Okay?
Okay, at work, Bante, I could just for the example, because I was in control, so I could say, if you are late, I will run your payroll. Done. Mm-hmm. Some staff couldn't get their salary on time because they were late. So they learned their lessons. But if I
very
have
good.
an appointment with the doctor, one time I told the doctor, if we were in Germany, I could sue you by letting me waiting for more than 35 minutes. So then I wouldn't go to doctor, they're always late. Then it's such things, if it happened to more doctors, then I feel like so bad.
Well, I don't know. My experience with doctors is you're always going to be there at least 2 hours. So I'm kind of used to that we're going to wait. I think that actually might be something that you can focus on as a practice for yourself. Patience. Right? What can you do if you know that you're going to wait around? Maybe you bring a book. Maybe you listen to a Dhamma talk. Right? If you know you're going to be waiting around, use that to your advantage. So, okay, they're going to make me wait? Fine. Guess what? I'm going to listen to this talk, right? Or I'm going to listen to this podcast or learn this skill or whatever you're going to do, right? Because normally people are always like, well, I don't have enough time for all my things. But then all of a sudden you have time. So use it to your advantage. Right? Maybe you always bring a book with you or your tablet or whatever so that you can listen to something, right? So that you can develop yourself, you know, professionally, personally, Dhamma-wise, whatever, right? So use that to your advantage. Always try to turn a disadvantage into an advantage, I think Sun Tzu maybe said that once. I don't know. But also the Buddha, right?
Okay, grazie.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you, Sister Rita. All right, the next questioner will be Carl. Carl, go ahead, Carl.
Good morning.
Hello, Carl.
I understood you say earlier you talked about suffering being coming from the mind.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also physical suffering. So are you saying that you can override physical suffering by just putting it out of your mind?
So when we talk about this is why words are so important, right? So I think the easiest way to understand when I say the suffering comes from the mind is this. There's a wonderful phrase, essentially, which is a modern version of the sutta, the Buddha, the simile of the arrows. And it goes something like, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So essentially what this means is that physical pain is inevitable. Because we have a body, we're going to have physical pain. Mental suffering is optional. So that's what we're working with, right? So even if you become an awakened being, your body will still have pain. Your body will still break down. Your body will still get sick, right? But they just don't mentally suffer because of it. They still feel it, right? But they don't mentally suffer. Right? It's not that they have blocked out any feeling in their body. It's that their reaction to it causes them to not suffer, right? Because they don't try to run away from it. There's no aversion. There's no attachment, right? Because they don't have that craving, then they don't suffer. That's all that means. So the physical aspects are still there. Physical pain is still there. I mean, obviously there is, science has kind of figured out the different ways to, like with anesthesia and things like what those do are block the pain receptors, right? It makes it so that you don't feel pain. So, I mean, there are ways of doing that, even with the mind, but that's kind of a different topic than when I'm talking about suffering in terms of the Buddhist context. We're talking about the mental suffering that we add on to what's already painful, physically.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you, Carl. The next questioner will be Julius or Fang Fang. Please unmute yourself. Go ahead, Fang.
Namo Buddhaya, good morning, Bante.
Hello.
Bante, today topic is pretty deep, and to get to state, the goal is to get to state of the mind to be equanimity, and it's kind of long journey. And previous karma, together with the duration, ignorance, also perception, are always our hindrances. So, would you suggest, while we are also practicing our mindfulness, we also practicing the insight meditation as well?
Well, insight meditation, again, we're a lot of words. So insight meditation in the modern, like the context of what's called insight meditation is mindfulness. Right? It's the same thing, right? So whatever you call it now, Vipassana technique, Mahasi Dao, Mahasi Sayadaw technique, insight technique, whatever, they're talking about the development of insight in the mind, the development of a mind state of what's called Vipassana, right? To see deeply, right? So when you are practicing some kind of mindfulness, you are practicing insight, right? When you're trying to be aware of what's going on in your mind and in your body, right? Being fully present and investigating the experience that you're going through, that's developing insight, right? So that's the same thing. If you're doing that, then you're developing insight. very slowly, slowly, slowly over time, right? But that's how you start to understand, you start to see things as they are, right? We only like to see things as we wish they would be. We don't like to see things as they are, and we don't know how to see things as they are. But these practices develop insight so we can see things as they are.
Oh, okay, thank you, Bante.
Was that Anthony or no? What your boy? What's the boy's name?
Ian and Brian.
Oh, Ian and Brian. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Hi, boys.
Actually, I would like to connect it with the Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta one day.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if we do the bhavana, the insight meditation. Also, we practice to contemplate the Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta
Yeah.
as well.
Well, seeing things as they are with insight is actually seeing anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Right? Because the Buddha says that it is a principle, a law of existence, that everything that is conditioned is impermanent, anicca. Everything that is conditioned is dukkha. Everything, all dhammas, everything, even nibbana, is anatta, right? So those three things, seeing that is seeing with vipassana. Also seeing with vipassana is doing what I taught Harita to do, seeing the gratification, the danger, and the escape. That's also seeing with insight. Also seeing with insight is seeing how things rise, they persist for a time, and then they cease. That's also what you see, right? Those are all part of the same thing. Those are all insight, vipassana, into the nature of reality, to see things as they are. When you start to see those things, then you're developing insight, because you understand, you see more deeply than you ever have before. You've reached another level and you understand, right? And then you have to keep going even more deeper than that, until you become awakened, right? But you go deeper and deeper and deeper in understanding at more refined levels, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Right?
Thank you, Bante.
Alright, thank you, Bante. Thank you, Sis Pang Pang. So, Bante, I don't see any more raised hands on the screens right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good time to close it off. But
Yep.
if you can give us some quick blessings on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dukkha patta chane dukkha, baya patta chane baya, soka patta chane soka, ontu sabbe pipaniyo, etta vata cha mehi sampadang punya sampadang, sabbe deva anumodantu, sabba sampatti siddhya, akasatta chabumatta deva naga mahidika, punyang tang anumoditva charang rakantu sasanang.
Sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay.
And thank you, everyone. And we're gonna have a same meeting again next week at the same time. And hopefully 2 weeks from now as well, we're gonna alternate Bante Pamutto from Buddhist Insight will also join us and is gonna stay with us until February, perhaps until next year, both with Bante Jayasara. So we're gonna have alternate Dhamma talk between Bante Jayasara and Bante Pamutto. So perhaps next week will be Bante Jayasara first, so Bante Pamutto has
Some time, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we're gonna close this puja this morning with Namakarapata.
All right.
Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhinyavade
telah mencapai penerangan sempurna. Aku bersujud di hadapan Sang Buddha, Sang Bhagawa. Bhagavato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Dhamma telah sempurna disebarkan oleh Sang Bhagawa. Aku bersujud di hadapan Dhamma. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Sangga siswa Sang Bhagawa telah bertindak sempurna. Aku bersujud di hadapan Sangga. Sabbe Sata, Bhavantu Sukhitata. May all beings be happy. Semoga semua makhluk hidup berbahagia. And now let's give respect to Bante Jayasara. Okasa Wandami Bante.
Sukiyatu. Sukiyatu. Sukiyatu.
Thank you, Bante. I'll see you in a few minutes, Bante.
All right. Thank you, friends. Have a good day, evening, wherever you're
Bye
at.
all.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us again.